Hello, hello. It's almost springtime here in Minnesota, so welcome to Gardening in 2024. Today's video, I'm going to be exploring indigenous flora of Minnesota. Indigenous flora are the native flowers that have been here in Minnesota since the beginning of time itself. And how they have influenced the types of bugs and animals that we have in the region. Indigenous also being that these plants are important to the indigenous people of Minnesota, the Anishinaabe and the Lakota people. In today's video, we're going to be discussing how we can introduce some of these plants to our gardens and how to just better our world and keep our world healthy for the next generations to come. Who am I? I promise I won't speak too long about who I am. I just want to reassure all of you, or assure you in the first place, that I know what I'm talking about. My name is Lucas Youngerberg. And I've been doing this for a very long time. Since my very, very early days, some of my earliest memories are actually harvesting strawberries along a woods with my family. And then it kind of evolved from there. My parents put in a couple tomato plants one year when we were young, and that was when I was like, oh my goodness, I can grow my own food. And then my grandmother, of course, encouraged me to continue with growing everything that we had around here. And then I just became obsessed and kind of a collector at that point of different plants of the area that grow here in Minnesota. I spent 1 year with a local master gardener, and he taught me all about growing vegetables and how to bring in different plants to, companion plants with those. He also taught me a lot about different flowers, and yeah, it was a really, really informative year to be able to work with a master gardener. His wife and his sister are also master gardeners, and so I got to work with all three of them. So that was really fun. I then worked at Drummer's Garden Center in Mankato, where a lot of the employees there are also master gardeners. I worked in the veggie section. I was one of the veggie guys, and I learned a lot from all of the different departments there. That's where I learned a lot about the different trees and shrubs, was actually from working with Drummers. They had different classes. They still have different classes every now and then about pruning and how to do XYZ different things in the garden. So check them out if you ever have free time and want to dive deeper into any of those subjects. And then I've also been working for 13 years professionally as a gardener in and around the southern Minnesota area, Mankato area. My boss, the owner of that company, is also a master gardener. A lot of our clients are older master gardeners who no longer can, be out in their gardens as much as they'd like. So they call us up to help them with their gardens. So I've learned a ton over the last 13 years working with that company. And then I continue to conduct different experiments on my own gardens here, on my family's farm, at my sister's farm, and then at my uncle's farm. My family is very encouraging of me experimenting, even when they don't quite understand right away what's going on. It's been fun. I have been adding new native species to my family's yard now for just a handful of years. Last year we started off with a huge project. I think we did something like 14 different varieties of, or new species to us that we had never grown before, that have not been on any of our farms before. So we reintroduced like 14 new species to our gardens. I then also, 2 years ago, I installed 150 some different trees and shrubs native to Minnesota to add in some biodiversity here on our yard, and to then also start the next generation of trees, since we saw the emerald ash borer come through and devastate a ton of our trees. So as those trees are dying out, I now have replacements growing to one day take their place. So we keep our little forest growing here on our farm. That's not 150 different species of plant, that's just 150 plants total. I think it was something like 12 different species of tree and shrub. So they didn't all get to be maple tree size, so just to clarify. The first question that I ask anyone when they're getting into gardening is, what do you want to produce or attract to your gardens? And unfortunately, we don't always get to, decide right away what we get to attract. Sometimes that's an extra bonus or a surprise, So what we'll be doing today is I'll be helping establish a little bit of sense of what we are attracting. A lot of people are going to want to attract bees or butterflies. Some people want to attract dragonflies for mosquito control. Some people want to attract bats for that. Some people want to attract toads. I love toads. They're so cool. And other people want to attract songbirds or, different things to their yard. So you can have the goal in mind to attract all of these things to your yard. That's what I do. I love everything. I want everything in my yard. I think that is so cool to have a huge range of plants and animals and bugs and things. So it makes life really exciting for me to see something that I haven't seen or haven't seen in a long time, in my garden. So with that, let's dive right into the plants. Why are these plants important in the home garden? So talking a little bit about the biodiversity again, among plants and what that means specifically. Having different plants in your garden planted among each other helps them, if like one plant develops a disease, you'll still have a ton of other plants that are probably resistant to that disease because they're a different species. It also just means that these plants can help prevent disease from spreading amongst each other. We then also have pest management, and so with that, one plant will be attracting a beneficial bug that another plant needs in order to take care of a pest on it. We see that a lot with ladybugs and aphids. One plant will attract ladybugs to eat the aphids of another plant. That's one example. There are tons of examples out there. Soil restoration and erosion control. A lot of our native plants are going to have deep root systems, and by having multiple different species of plant, you're going to have different levels of root systems going and different root structures going. So that's going to pull deep nutrients from the depths of the earth up to the topsoil level, which encourages other shallow-rooted plants to grow more prolifically because they have more nutrients. It also protects the soil from being blown away in the wind or washing away So we want to make sure that our topsoil stays pretty much where we want it to, right there. We don't want it going to the neighbors. You know, they can have their own topsoil. um, and then our indigenous plants, because they developed here in Minnesota, they're more drought tolerant and they're more weather resistant. So when we have huge windstorms, they're not going to be blown over and snapped like what you would see with an Asiatic lily. You know, the tops of the lily is really heavy, and when the wind comes and blows, it snaps them off. We don't see that with a lot of indigenous plants because they're accustomed to the weather here. Same with the root systems in the drought. Their roots are deeper, so they're more tolerant of drier conditions when that happens. And then what plants provide in an ecosystem. We talked a little bit about the food sources for all stages of life. That includes butterflies laying eggs on plants, the caterpillars eating the leaf, and then using the plant as a structure to then form their cocoon, their chrysalis, and then developing as a butterfly using the flower as a food source. This goes with all different kinds of animals. A lot of like reptiles and small mammals will use the caterpillar, for instance, as a food source. They'll use other bugs that use or eat on the decomposing parts of the plant as a food source. And then you've got the seeds of the plant that go for birds and small mammals, and it's just a whole life process kind of thing. It's great. Shelter and nesting. Birds obviously will use smaller twigs and things for constructing nesting. They will also use trees, shrubs, and grasses, different things for shelter throughout the winter. And then we also see solitary bees using like hollowed out stems for nesting purposes. They will lay one egg in there versus having a hive. So it's really cool, all of the different things that plants can be used for. And then of course we've got moisture control. With the deep root systems of native plants that can act as a sponge, which prevents flooding from happening. It also encourages the soil to retain a lot more moisture throughout the year. So then when we do have periods of no rain, the soil is still moist. So these are all super beneficial things that you can expect happening in your garden. We're going to start off with the large flowered bellwort. This is a plant that is new to me from last year when we found it growing all over in my sister's woods. I have just below that the Latin name. The Latin name is important just so then you guys can verify what a plant is. There's a little device that you guys use in your pocket called your cell phone. Has a Google on it, and that is a really good place to double check what kind of plant you've got by using the Latin name. In the search bar, that it should bring up most of the things like what zone it grows in, what growing conditions it needs, and all of the different fun facts about the plant. This flower in particular, the bellwort, likes deep shade. I know a lot of you guys are looking for deep shade plants, so I've included a handful of them throughout. This one, because it grows in the deep shade, is going to want to have a lot of mulch. Leaf mulch is preferred in this case, and that also helps with proper soil construction, so then the roots of this plant are healthy. And the moisture level is where it wants it. This one blooms in May. I have this kind of sorted out in bloom times as well. And then the zone for this plant is zone 3 to 8. What that means is in Minnesota, we have a zone range of 5 to, I believe, 2. So for us, it's really important to know where we fall on the zone map. They changed us now to a zone 5. I don't fully believe it, because if we have a severe zone 4 winter again, then we're going to lose a lot of those plants that can only grow and survive up to zone 5. Basically what the zones mean is zones are the winter hardiness of a plant. And that in southern states, you'll get more into zone hardiness of like heat index, so how hot a plant can tolerate it as well. I see that a lot in my Arizona gardens. So in Minnesota, I recommend any plant from zone 4, 3, 2, or 1. That is a good plant to plant here. Anything 5, 6, 7, 8, or higher is going to be for a zone much warmer than ours. They just can't handle the severity of our winters in those cases. Obviously, that goes with saying that they did change a bunch of Minnesota to zone 5, and we will see how that goes moving forward. Anyway, and then I include a couple of fun facts about these plants, why I like them in particular. This is an old medicine plant. I think that's really cool to have different medicines and foods growing in my gardens, so that's why I include it in mine. And this is also a great plant for long-lasting early blooms. We usually only see a lot of people having daffodils and tulips in the spring. So this is a really fun plant that is different from both of those, unique to Minnesota and the northern states. So this is a really fun plant to bring in some biodiversity. Our next plant is the Bloodroot. These ones in the photo are really small. I had just planted them. They have a really, they're so fun. They love the deep shade again. They're something that grows in the forests of Minnesota. They like a mulch or a leaf mulch, same as like what the bellwort did. They bloom in May. They're zone 3 to 8. The blood of these guys is toxic. They get it. They get the name from their root. When the root is broken, it produces a red substance, the color of blood. So if you do manage to just break something and get it on your skin, just wash your hands. You'll be fine. Do not eat it, please. And it's definitely worth the early bloom and interesting foliage. The foliage, as you can kind of see back there, has a fun little doop-de-doop going on, and I don't know, I think plants that have unique looking leaves are really fun to have. So that is Bloodroot. The next one I have is Columbine. This one I have growing in both sun and shade and everything in between. Obviously the ones in the sun perform a lot better in my opinion than the ones in the deep shade, but I love the way that they look in the shade too. They're just a fun pop of color here in the spring. Mulch is recommended because these guys kind of seed all over the place. It also helps identify where this plant is right away in the spring. If you do any like weeding, it's good to have mulch down for that purpose. This is a zone 3 to 9. Hummingbirds love this plant. You'll notice hummingbirds really are drawn to red flowers, but as long as you have plants out there that provide the food that they need, they're going to love it. Like I said, this one reseeds readily. That means that you will see, as long as you don't deadhead it, so cutting it back after it flowers, the seeds will sprinkle around the garden and you'll have baby plants popping up here and there. I encourage you to let some of that happen. Don't fight nature, let nature work for you, you know? And then this is also a host plant for the Columbine dusky wing butterfly. You'll hear me talk a bit about host plants throughout. A host plant is something that like a butterfly will use to host the baby caterpillar as a food source. You'll see this most commonly with people talk about it with milkweeds and how that is the host plant for the monarch butterfly caterpillar. So a lot of plants that we're going to be discussing have these host plant properties. And it's not only unique to butterflies, we obviously see it in moths, and then we also see it in different species of bee can use it as a host plant. They can also use it with different larvae stages of different bugs will have different host plants. So that's really fun to keep in mind. We next are moving into June with the Baptisia. Baptisia is also the Latin name. So Australis is not what is shown in this video, in this photo here. This one, I believe, is a burgundy. The Australis is a false indigo, so more of a blue Baptisia. But there are a lot of different colors of these guys, but they're just a really fun plant. They're sun-loving. I recommend using mulch to establish them, but once they're established, they're going to be able to take care of themselves pretty well. Blooms in June, like I said, zone 3 to 9, so they're great here in Minnesota. This one gets, well, almost all of these will get 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, so be mindful of that when you're planting one of these guys. You probably only need one to fill up a space. So keep that in mind. These are deer and rabbit resistant, and they are the host plant for at least 6 different butterfly species, including one of my favorite, the eastern-tailed blue butterfly. It's a little tiny blue butterfly. Super cool. Yeah, go ahead and play around with different colors. Obviously, going with the indigenous species versus a cultivar like what I have here is going to be really, really beneficial for a lot wider range of the wildlife that we're trying to attract to our garden. But with that said, go ahead and play with fun things, you know, that we've got. I think that's important. We've got the native and Minnesota hardy geraniums. The Geranium maculatum is the native indigenous geranium to Minnesota. There's a lot of geraniums that are not native. I don't know off the top of my head which ones in this photo collage are native or not. By the way, all of these plant photos are from my gardens, so these are plants that I have proven are good to overwinter here. I know that the maculatum geranium has a pink flower. I do not know if this one that I have photoed here is maculatum. These plants grow in both sun and shade. It depends a lot on the variety as well. Some of these guys, like the one with this darker purple foliage, They are growing in full sun all year round in my gardens. And the other two are growing in part shade. The pink one I have also grown in full sun. I prefer it in kind of a part shade, part sun kind of environment. Mulch is helpful for establishing. This one blooms in June, zones 3 to 9. This is a ground cover plant, so they will create a dense, short, spreading habit. So they're really, really great on borders of your garden and just to fill in spaces that you don't want to weed. These guys are great for that. These are also deer and rabbit resistant. You'll notice that a lot with plants that have a smell to them, that they will be deer and rabbit resistant. We have Monarda, and that is a bee balm or a wild bergamot. The one that I have photoed is not a native species. This is a cultivar, but I thought it was stunning and pretty, so I have this one, and I think I planted 2 different varieties of native Monarda last year, and so I'm excited to see how they perform this year. The native is the fistulosa, as I have mentioned here, so keep that in mind when you're looking at these different cultivars of them. This one is a full sun loving. They love the dry conditions, so when mulching, you'll use it to keep weeds away and to just reduce the amount of water that you're putting on these plants. When watering as well, this is a really good example of a plant to be mindful of how you water. Do not get water on the leaves or on the flowers of the plant, because in this plant's case you will create powdery mildew, which is a white substance that just makes all of the foliage go kind of this cloudy gray color. It won't kill the plant, but it really doesn't look nice. So when watering, make sure to water the soil around the plant and at the very base of the plant, not to get it on the leaves. This one blooms in July, zone 3 to 8, so it grows here great. This has a rich herby smell throughout the entire plant. Everything smells of this very deep herb earth smell. It's great. This one, you'll see it is loved by hummingbirds. You'll notice also along with the color that it has a long tubular type flower. So anything with a large, long tubular flower is going to be great for hummingbirds, large butterflies, and large bumblebees, because they can all reach into that. This is also deer and rabbit resistant. We've got Echinacea coneflower. There are a ton of coneflowers out there. I honestly had no idea how wide this family was until I started introducing more species to my gardens. I now have, I think, 5 different varieties of the coneflower family. There's gray-headed coneflower, there's a yellow bushes coneflower, there's so many different coneflowers. So I love this one. This is one of the first plants that I got started. This is a sun to part sun. The ones that I have pictured here are in kind of a part sun condition. Mulch is preferred to get them established and also to help with weeding. The first year, especially if these are grown by seed, the first year they'll just be foliage, and then the second year they'll start blooming. So that's something important to keep in mind too. This blooms in July, zone 4 to 9. I love this plant, obviously, in a large planting setting. Uh, it's a great plant for companion planting. It'll pop up here and there in amongst other plantings that you have. Reseeds readily, so if you get one plant established, you'll have a couple dozen easy in a couple years. This is a great winter structure plant and provides food for winter wildlife. So what that means is don't cut this down in the winter, in the fall. Leave this one standing because it provides structure. It has some winter interest because those little cones will stay. So I think they look really fun in the snow. And then birds love them in the wintertime. They'll be sitting on there and picking out seeds all winter long. So definitely check out the coneflowers and the different native family species of them. There's so many and they're so cool. Next, one of my favorite families is the milkweed. I'm talking about the incarnata and the tuberosa. Oh my goodness, it's been a while since I had to say any of these names. Tuberosa is the orange one, and the incarnata is the pink swamp milkweed. I hope I got that right. Anyway, depending on the variety, these are going to perform great in sun or in shade. Some of them do great in just sun, some of them do great in just shade. I know there's a poke milkweed that grows great in the shade, and that is one of them that I'm experimenting with this year. Mulching is recommended. It just helps them get established, keeps weeds away from them, so then you can identify when you're out there weeding what is what. Blooms in July. Zone 3 to 9 for most varieties. There are a lot of varieties south of Minnesota that will not grow here. So double check what varieties grow for you here, and then you can expand from these two that I have suggested for you. There's obviously the common milkweed, the world milkweed, which is a really fun short white one. The white one that I have pictured here is Cinderella, which is basically just the white version of the pink incarnata milkweed. So yeah, you've got tons of different varieties that you can choose from. These ones are just the ones I'm going to highlight today. Oh goodness, where was I? Oh, this is a specialty plant. So with specialty host plants, this means that there are some varieties of bug that will only use this as a host plant or only use this as a food source. So the monarch caterpillar is one of the best known specialist bugs who will use this in a special feeding manner. So they're only found on milkweeds. These are deer and rabbit resistant because of the milky content. Don't eat this, unless you know what you're doing. Like the milk content is really toxic. So be very, very careful with these plants. Wear gloves, wash your hands afterwards, all of that good stuff. This is a plant that will make your colonist neighbor really angry. When I started planting these, my family, who has been farming for 125 years, was beside themselves. They were so mad that I was bringing in all of these different milkweeds to the yard. And they have come around to the idea of keeping natural, native spaces in the yard now because they saw the increase of monarch butterflies in our yard after I started planting these again. So it is really cool. You can get around to your neighbors, can convince them that this is good in the long run. It just takes some time. Another one that's going to get you in trouble with your neighbors, I'm sure, is the goldenrod. Um, this plant has so much history in my family. Um, Depending on the variety, they are going to do well in sun or shade. There are a lot of different varieties of this, and they're really fun. They have different flower structures, different heights. They're just a really cool plant. Mulching is recommended. That way you can identify it from other things while it is growing. Starts blooming in late July, and these ones will bloom depending on variety all the way up until it freezes and all the way through until it freezes. You know, different months have different flowers with this one, so it's a really, really diverse family. Zone 2 to 8, so this is a really hardy plant. Again, depending on variety in this one, so double check always what zone you're planting them in. Stunning displays of yellow. These ones will have a clump forming type habit when they're growing. So the first year, you know, you'll plant it, it'll be one stem, one little flower cluster. By the next year, it should triple in size, and from there it'll quadruple, or, you know, you'll quickly have this large display of a beautiful clump of yellow when they bloom. Depending on variety too, you want to make sure that you're not getting ones that spread by rhizomes. You want them to kind of stay in that clumping form, in my opinion. If you have a large space, those ones that spread by rhizome are totally fine. These are deer and rabbit resistant as far as I can tell. Because I grow so many of them, the deer and rabbit don't bother them at all. This is not the same as ragweed. So as you can see, I've got two different varieties of plant depicted here, and that is to go over identification. Clearly you can see two different plants, and I have the one in the middle showing both plants side by side. Ragweed is something that causes horrible allergies for a lot of people in the summer months. The ragweed is the plant on the left. You can see it has bigger leaves. They're usually that three-lobed shaped leaf. The reason why ragweed is so dangerous with allergies, dangerous is extreme, but it's because that plant is pollinated by the wind. So the pollen is light enough that it just needs a light wind to move and carry the pollen through the air, and that is what causes people allergies. Whereas the goldenrod, which is the yellow plant on the right, that is a heavy pollen. So it can't cause allergies in people because you'd have to have your face right in the flower in order to have an allergic reaction to it. So because the pollen is heavy, it's going to require a bee or another pollinator to come over to the plant, collect the pollen, and move it to another section. So the goldenrod does not cause allergies, but the ragweed does cause allergies. And something unique about this plant is allergy companies will use the flower of the goldenrod on their allergy medicine labels and different, advertising, because it's yellow and it looks fun. Whereas like the ragweed, the true ragweed, looks ugly and green, and no one's going to be interested by that. So they use the yellow goldenrod to advertise, which has given it a bad rap over the years. And this is guaranteed, when you first plant it, it is guaranteed to scare people who don't know the difference and prepare for meltdowns. It has happened before, and I'm sure it will happen again. So just be educated. That's all I have to say about that. Anise hyssop. The Agastache family is a really beautifully diverse family. They have different colors in the flowers, different shapes of the flowers, different heights in the plant. As you can see, it brings in a lot of different kinds of bees. These are 3 totally different bumblebees that I've found over the years on this plant. The one on the top left, I believe, is a tri-colored bumblebee, and that was new to us on our family farm. We've never seen it here before last year, so I know that planting a large variety of different native plants is making a difference. It is bringing in different wildlife that I haven't seen before, so that is really cool. That's exciting for me. So this plant grows in sun and shade. They perform better in the sun, in my opinion, but I have seen different varieties where with too much sun, their leaves can burn. So having that kind of part shade, part sun kind of balance is really, really beneficial to this plant. Mulch is recommended. This plant will spread by seed, so having that mulch down will kind of slow that process down, which, depending on who you are, is a good thing or a bad thing. Blooms in August. It is zone 4 to 9, again depending on variety. The Agastache name is going to be applied to everything in the Agastache family. So some of these will not overwinter here in Minnesota. The one that I have depicted is Anise hyssop or giant blue hyssop. Those will grow here. These are great for pollinators, as I've explained before. This is also a deer and rabbit resistant plant because it has that herby taste to it. Anything in the mint family is going to be resistant to deer and rabbits for the most part. Reseeds readily, like I said. This is great for summertime tea. As the name implies, it has a licorice flavor to it. So in the summer, that's just a really pleasant, refreshing, cool drink to have. We're getting into Rudbeckia. This is the Blackeyed Susan. There's a lot of different varieties of this guy too. Here I have 2 different varieties. The one on the right grows very short and in thick clusters, whereas the one on the right grows very tall and will reseed all over the place. It's a really, really fun plant. These love sun and shade. Again, depending on variety, they're going to perform better in one area or the other. I've noticed the tall ones growing best in a little bit more shade, not full shade, but a part shade kind of condition, whereas the shorter variety is definitely more of a sun-loving plant. These bloom in August. Mulch is good for weed control, especially with the short ones, just because they're shorter. It's good to be able to manage the weeds around those so they don't get overwhelmed. And then for the ones that reseed, it's good to kind of manage that so then these plants don't take over your garden. Zone 3 to 10, reseeds readily, like I said, great winter structure and food source for winter wildlife. It looks like the birds have gone through a lot of them already in my gardens, but it's a really fun plant to have for that purpose. The Joe Pye weed. This is one of my absolute favorites. It's great in both sun and shade. I have a lot of this growing now in more shady regions of my garden, which is really cool to see. Blooms in August, and it has a long bloom season on this one. Zone 3 to 10. It's deer resistant, rabbit resistant. As far as I can tell, I've not seen deer or rabbit on this one in my gardens. I don't believe I've seen it in any of my client gardens either. This is a host plant for a lot of different species. It attracts the most wildlife in my gardens, as I've observed. There are tons and tons of bees, butterflies, moths, and then even birds will be enjoying them as they phase into their seed form. This plant is just absolutely incredible. Oh, I do want to mention, just because something is a host plant, it does not necessarily mean that you will see butterflies on the plant. Host plant in Joe Pye weed sense is for both caterpillars as well as adult individuals. This plant in particular that I grows up to 7 feet tall, and I have seen that happen in my gardens. There are other varieties that grow much shorter than that. They can get up to like 3 or 4 feet, which is really nice for people who don't want to have a giant plant in their garden. This is also a really good plant to put in the back corner of your garden because it's going to have that tall structure. This one may cause confusion in family members after you tell them, I planted Joe Pye in your garden. It's recommended to inform them that Joe Pye is a plant, indeed, and not a man. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Obedient plant. This is a sun to part sun loving plant. I have a few of them growing in kind of a part shade, and they seem to be doing well in that, and they're beautiful in any place that you put them. Mulch is recommended to slow down their spreading. They spread in a clump form, but they are an aggressive clump forming plant, so they will take over a space if you want them to. With this mulching, it also helps identify them right away because they don't bloom until September, so keep that in mind. Zone 3 to 9, incredible when planted in large groupings, and this plant is going to want to create a large grouping just naturally. Bumblebees, hummingbirds love it, and as you can see, this is a perfect plant to catch those bumblebutt photos. One of my favorites. Chelone or Turtlehead is best in a part shade kind of setting. I try to keep this one out of the sun just because these leaves will burn pretty easy. They have a lot of newer varieties too that are more sun tolerant, but put this one more in a part shade for best results, in my opinion. Mulch is recommended for moisture. This plant loves to have a little bit of moisture. It blooms in October and goes until frost. I have seen bumblebees sleep inside the flowers during those cold months, so it's really cute to come out in the morning and see who slept over inside one of the flowers. Is a zone 329, forms stunning clumps. This one doesn't spread very aggressively, but it does form a really solid clump, so make sure to keep that in mind when you're planting these as well. Like I said, the bees will sleep in the blooms. They pollinate by going inside of the flower, and so sometimes these get a nickname, hot lips or pink lips or something, because it does look like when the bee goes inside that the flower is just moving. It's really funny. This is deer and rabbit resistant as far as I can tell. I think mostly because they grow in that clumping form, that there's so much of them that they're just not palatable to deer. Moving on to the asters, these guys are going to take you all the way through till it freezes, which is a really cool plant. They love both sun and shade. That can also depend on variety as well. There are a ton of different varieties of aster. I believe I have 5 different varieties. I only have 4 photographed here. And I'm hoping to include another potentially 3 new varieties this coming spring. But we'll see. We'll have to go out and count how many different varieties I have of this again. These ones, I recommend some mulch just to get them established, so then you can identify what's going on. These bloom in September until it freezes. Zone 3 to 8, always double check on this, because they do have a lot of the fancier ones that they'll have at like a Walmart or something. Those will be designed for more of a annual effect, where they'll only grow for 1 year and then they'll die in the winter, or they'll be more recommended for a warmer climate. Zone is what we just talked about. Wide range of sizes and growth habit. So as you can see, not very well in this photo, but as I know, because I live with these, the bottom right plant only grows about 1 foot to 1.5 feet tall. Deep cluster kind of habit on that one, so that one's really good for borders. Then you've got the one to the top and the right is a smooth aster. That one grows very tall. It has smaller bluish, kind of purpley flowers. And then the 2 to the left of that are New England asters. And they grow tall, and they'll have a larger bloom to them, whereas the one just in the middle has a white flower. That's Calico Aster, and that one grows kind of that mid-height range, and then they have very tiny flowers, but they're very, very fun to have around. They also have that clustering type habit, but they'll be an aggressive cluster. And then you've got ones like that love the shade and the woods aster, and they usually grow very single type in shade, so they don't have that clustering habit. But those ones I've used in wedding bouquets, and they're really fun. They're just a really cool plant. These are deer and rabbit resistant as far as I can tell. I also grow so many of them that I have not noticed any gardens that have an issue with deer or rabbit destroying their asters. This is another host plant, As we've discussed in the past, you know what that is now. And that is the range of plants, my 15 recommended for you anyway. We talked a little bit about winter. So in the winter, I want to move forward with that. You should, in the fall anyway, rake the leaves to the garden. This is something that most of you who live in a town have to do anyway, is you have to clean up your leaves. So the garden is a really good place to put your leaves. I always have, not always, but for the most part, I've been raking leaves into the garden to form a sort of mulch layer. This is a place where I can find a lot of ladybugs, the true ladybug, and a lot of other bugs, beetles, bees will overwinter under that leaf mulch. So that's really cool to have in your gardens. Birds will also go through in the winter if there's not a lot of snow, and they'll kind of scratch through that leaf mulch just to find different worms and different bugs that they can eat through the winter. Cutting your plants down, I recommend to do that in spring. That way the leaves won't blow around in the winter. After you have placed them in your gardens, the plant structure will kind of keep the wind from blowing everything around. And then another reason to keep your plants up, like we discussed, was as a food source and as shelter for birds. When it is time to cut down in the spring, I practice, and I recommend people practice, a chop and drop kind of method. So that is where you just basically cut the plant and leave it where it falls. Obviously keep it out of pathways, you know, and just use common sense with it. Be careful when you're cutting things. Some bees will, as I believe I discussed earlier, some bees will use the hollowed out stems as a place to lay their eggs and raise the next generation of that particular species. Those are called solitary bees, and they're so fun to have, in my opinion. They're smaller generally, and they come in all sorts of colors and shapes and different personalities even. They're cool. And then I want to discuss, because I know a few people have questions on, you know, it's great to have all of that information, but how do I actually get started? Where do I find these plants? You know, how do I order? So I am going to include my favorite recent place that I've been purchasing from. Last year I found them for the first time, and it's been love ever since. Prairie Moon Nursery. They're based out of Winona, Minnesota, so they're a great local company to support, and they also know a lot about the native plants of our region. When I go onto their website, you can request a catalog. You can also just scroll through all of the different plants that they have in their plant selection. I recommend making a wish list. If you see something that catches your eye, add it to your wish list. Maybe you'll get around to planting it this year, maybe that's a plant for next year, but having that wish list is going to be really helpful when making your order. So, to order online, first go to their website, click Shop Spring Plants, and then scroll over to the mix and match tray. That's what you see in this photo here to the right. They have a different levels of, you know, what you can mix and match, how many you can mix and match together. My personal favorite is going with the 6 species. So that is 2 varieties of plant will have a content of 7 of those, and then you'll have 4 other species of plant that you'll get 6 of each. And so these mix and match trays are up to you to construct. Select what you want to include in your garden. So pick out which ones are available for this mix and match, which ones you think you'll enjoy growing the most, and then check out and get excited for spring. Yeah, and that's it. That's my presentation, guys. I think that's an hour, so that's good enough for me. Let me know if you have any questions, if you have any concerns. Obviously, leave comments in the video, or if you know me, reach out to me personally. That's totally fine. I'll leave a link in the description below this video to the Prairie Moon Nursery, so then you guys have easy access to their resources. Anyway, thank you so much. I hope you learned something. If you didn't, well, that's pretty cool if you didn't learn something, because that means you already knew it. So have a good day, guys. Have a great spring, and I can't wait to grow with you this next year. Bye!